Hi, this is George, and you're watching The Return of the King channel. The prophet Joel tells us, "The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." The awesome day of the Lord is the time of Jacob's trouble in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it's known as the Tribulation. It's a 7-year period of time so terrible that Jesus in Matthew 24:22 says that if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. On September 7th of this year, a blood moon will appear over Jerusalem. I'm looking for the tribulation to start in a year of Jubilee. Based on a prophecy by the Essenes found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we can calculate the years of Jubilee if we know the year of Christ's death. In a previous video, whose link is appearing here, I make the case for Christ's death in 32 AD. That prophecy says, "Liberty will be proclaimed for them, to free them from the debt of all their iniquities. And this will happen in the first week of the Jubilee, which follows the 9 Jubilees." In other words, 7 years after the Jubilee year, something is going to happen to pay the price for our sins. That was Christ's death on the cross and his resurrection. That makes 25 AD and 2025 a year in which the Jubilee year will begin. This passage from Isaiah 61, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, along with this passage from Isaiah 63, links the day of God's vengeance, the tribulation, to the year of Jubilee. It was for me the day of vengeance, the year for me to redeem had come. On the calendar used at the time of Christ, the year of Jubilee will begin at sunset on October 2nd, 2025, from Jerusalem. On today's modern Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, begins one day earlier. Based on Daniel 9:27, the tribulation will begin with the Antichrist making a strong covenant with many for 1 week. The 1 week symbolizing the 7-year tribulation. What we are seeing here on this billboard, which first appeared on June 27th in Tel Aviv, could be that covenant. The Abraham Alliance, it's time for a new Middle East. The Antichrist will somehow be involved in this covenant, most likely enforcing the agreement. This covenant will go into full effect sometime during the Jubilee year, most likely early this fall after Yom Kippur. This blood moon, which is a total lunar eclipse, is the only lunar eclipse to appear over Jerusalem prior to the start of the Jubilee year. During the Jubilee year, there will be 2 more blood moons. The March 2nd and 3rd eclipse will not be visible over Jerusalem, and the August 27th and 28th lunar eclipse will drop below the horizon when viewed from Jerusalem, just as the eclipse is beginning. In 2027, there are no blood moons. It's not until July of 2028 that a partial blood moon appears, and then the first total lunar eclipse, blood moon, to be visible from Jerusalem, appears on December 31st to January 1st. The blood moon of September 7th begins to appear in Jerusalem just after the moon rises at 7:27 p.m. It reaches maximum at 9:11 p.m. This blood moon is the blood moon spoken of by the prophet Joel. It appears just before the start of the tribulation. Jewish rabbis believed that solar eclipses represent judgment coming to the world, and blood moons, judgment coming to Israel. The prophet Joel in chapter 2, verses 30 through 31 says this, "And I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. The geographic epicenter of the tribulation is the land of Israel, and specifically Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. The land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem belong to God. The rest of the world was given to lesser gods, Satan and his followers. Michael Heiser, in the book The Unseen Realm, says this about the land of Israel. In the last chapter, we got our first exposure to Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9, Yahweh's disinheritance of the nations. This was the theological lens through which an ancient Israelite viewed her own nation with respect to all others, and her Elohim, Yahweh, against the gods of those nations. By definition, Yahweh was superior. He was the Most High, Elyon, the title used in Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. The Old Testament therefore describes a world where cosmic geographical lines have been drawn. Israel was holy ground because it was Yahweh's inheritance, in the language of Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. The territory of other nations belonged to other Elohim because Yahweh had decreed it. Psalm 82 told us that these lesser Elohim were corrupt. We aren't told how the Elohim Yahweh assigned to the nations became corrupt, only that they were. It is clear from Deuteronomy that these Elohim were illegitimate for Israelite worship. This is why we find Israel surrounded by nations that want to wipe them off the face of the earth and take the land. It is a cosmic battle between Yahweh and the ruler of this world, Satan. In a nutshell, God gave all the nations over to Satan and his followers, except for the Israelites in the land of Israel. During the tribulation, King Jesus is going to take back what rightfully belongs to him, dominion and rulership over the entire earth. Where this eclipse appears in the heavens tells of our escape from the dragon. This is the view of the blood moon from Jerusalem at its maximum. It's been about 2 hours since it has risen above the eastern horizon. It appears above the tail of the dragon along with Saturn, a symbol of Satan and his kingdom. Saturn will spend the next 3.5 years in the constellation of the dragon, before moving into the constellation of Taurus, representing Christ the Judge. The prophet Isaiah tells us what will happen to the dragon during the tribulation. In that day the Lord, with his hard and great and strong sword, will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea. Cetus is a serpent that dwells in the sea. Revelation chapter 12 is about our escape from the dragon by means of the rapture. There are 3 signs in the heavens related to these passages. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. Passage 1 is known as the Revelation 12 sign. It appeared on September 23, 2017. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Passage 2 appears to be related to the final blood moon appearing over Jerusalem above the tail of the dragon prior to the start of the tribulation. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up, raptured to God and his throne. Passage 3 will be fulfilled on the Feast of Trumpets this year, September 24th, 2025. Exactly 8 years and 1 day from the Revelation 12 sign. The number 8 in the Bible represents new beginnings. I believe the rapture can occur any time between now and the start of the tribulation this fall. There is a number of ways in which what we are seeing in the heavens can be interpreted. The Revelation 12 sign, which began the countdown to the rapture, occurred on September 23, 2017. In the days leading up to the completion of the sign, Mercury, Mars, and Venus moved into the constellation of Leo. Leo consists of 9 stars. The addition of 3 wandering stars completes the crown of 12 stars. The planet Jupiter, representing the male child, Christ and his bride, has spent approximately 9 months in the body or womb of Virgo, symbolizing the pregnancy, and has exited the body of Virgo and is positioned here. The sign completes when the moon is under the feet of Virgo. Part 1 of the signs appearing in Revelation chapter 12 has completed. Part 2. I believe this sign completes with the appearance of the blood moon over Israel and Jerusalem. If that's the case, then I believe the rapture will occur sometime starting with this blood moon and before the start of the tribulation. If not, if it's been fulfilled in some other way previous to this blood moon, then we can depart any time before this blood moon. At the end of this video, I'll show you where the 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems of the dragon are located. On September 7th, the blood moon will appear above the tail of the dragon, along with Saturn, a symbol of Satan and his kingdom. Cetus is a serpent that dwells in the sea. The symbol of the Christian is the fish, symbolized by Pisces. 2 fish symbolizing the Jew and the Gentile. Biblically, you are either a Jew or a Gentile. Both can be saved by faith in Jesus Christ. Both the dragon and the fish dwell in the sea. The dragon of Revelation chapter 12 wants to devour the male child. The male child symbolizes Christ and his bride. The symbol of the Christian is the fish. So this scene in the heavens makes perfect sense in the context of Revelation chapter 12. According to theologian Joseph Zeiss, in his book, The Gospel in the Stars, the constellations of the Lamb, the fish, and the dragon are the constellations of the blessed hope, the rapture. The bands of the fish are on the neck of the dragon. This symbolizes the dragon being restrained by the Christian church. At the rapture, Christ the Lamb comes for his bride, the Christian, and snatches her away from the dragon who wants to devour her. The restraint of the dragon by the church will be removed at the rapture. Part 3 will be fulfilled 8 years and 1 day from the Revelation 12 sign. The number 8 in the Bible represents a new beginning. On the Jewish calendar used at the time of Christ, the Feast of Trumpets begins at sunset on September 23, 2025, and ends on September 24th at sunset. At sunset on the 24th of September, the moon will be under the feet of Virgo, just like it was when the Revelation 12 sign completed. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up, raptured to God and his throne. On September 23, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign completes when the moon appears under the feet of Virgo. The important item to notice on this slide is the location of Jupiter. Jupiter is the male child, Christ and his bride, whom the dragon wants to devour. It's been in the body of Virgo for approximately 9 months and is now situated here. On the Jewish calendar used at the time of Christ, the Feast of Trumpets 2025 begins at sunset on September 23rd and ends at sunset on the 24th. At sunset on the 24th, the heavens look like this. Venus, the bright morning star, is in the constellation of the lion of the tribe of Judah. In the book of Revelation, Jesus tells us he's the bright morning star. It is Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, who is found worthy to open the scroll and its 7 seals, which begins the tribulation. Mars, the symbol of the red dragon, is right here. Timothy Alberino, in his book Birthright, makes the case and believes that Mars was once the actual home of the red dragon, Satan. Revelation 12:4 says this, "And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it." So here's the symbol of the red dragon, Mars, just prior to the start of the Jubilee year and the tribulation, waiting to devour the child. But there's a problem. When the Revelation 12 sign completes in 2017, Jupiter, representing the child, was here. But guess what? In 2025, Jupiter isn't here. It's here. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up, harpazoed, raptured to God and his throne. Gemini represents our heavenly wedding, which begins with the rapture. The 2 figures are twin brothers. This figure represents Christ based on the meaning of the principal star in his head called Pollux, meaning the ruler, the judge. The other figure symbolizes the bride of Christ. As we have just read, the bride of Christ in Revelation chapter 12 is symbolized by the male child. At the rapture, Christ descends from heaven and snatches us away from the dragon. The story of our escape began on September 23, 2017, with the male child, symbolized by Jupiter, emerging from Virgo's womb here. 8 years later, just prior to the start of the tribulation, the red dragon, whose symbol is the red planet Mars, is located in the precise location it needs to be, to devour the male child. But he fails in his attempt to devour the male child. That is to stop the rapture and the wedding from occurring. If he can keep the rapture from occurring, Christ cannot bring judgment to the earth, and Satan can continue his rule over the earth indefinitely. The story appearing in the heavens on the Feast of Trumpets 2025 is one of victory over the dragon. It matches the end of the story found in Revelation chapter 12, verse 5. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up, harpazoed, raptured to God and his throne. Jupiter is in the constellation of the wedding. Jewish weddings begin with the bridegroom snatching his bride away to the wedding chamber. That's the story we see here. Our escape begins when Christ descends from the heavens and snatches us from the jaws of the dragon. He then takes us away to God and his throne, heaven, the wedding chamber. A Jewish wedding at the time of Christ lasted 7 days. We will be with Christ in heaven for 7 years. But there's more to Jupiter than meets the eye. Jupiter is a striped planet with what appears to be a wound. Isaiah 53:5 tells us that he was wounded for our transgressions, and by his stripes we are healed. It's known as the King Planet. Prior to Christ's birth, on the Feast of Trumpets 3 BC, it appeared in conjunction with the king star Regulus, in the constellation of the Lion of the tribe of Judah, Leo. This conjunction, along with other signs in Leo, is what led the Magi to look for the newborn King of the Jews in Bethlehem. Revelation 12:5. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and his throne. In Revelation 3:21, Jesus says this, "The one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne." And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures. Jupiter has 4 large moons that orbit the planet. I believe they symbolize the four living creatures. The moons are named after their discoverer, Galileo. They are called the Galilean moons. Jesus was a Galilean Jew. Jesus came from the town of Nazareth in Galilee. Jupiter has over 75 smaller moons that circle the planet. I heard around the throne the voice of many angels, numbering myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice. This is what I believe these smaller moons represent: the multitude of angels surrounding the throne. When we get raptured, where do we go? Revelation 12:5. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and his throne. Jupiter represents Christ, and it represents the Christian in Revelation chapter 12, the male child who is caught up to God and his throne. When we become believers, we become one with Christ. He is the head, and we are the body of Christ. Jupiter, a striped planet with blood-colored stripes and a blood-colored wound, also represents a crucified and resurrected Christ on his throne, surrounded by the four living creatures and thousands upon thousands of angels, and then those of us who arrive with him. As a groom takes his bride home to be with him for 7 years, as he begins to take his kingdom back from the dragon. On the Feast of Trumpets 2025, the story in the heavens tells of our escape from the red dragon who wants to devour us. The dragon lies in wait for the birth to foil the rapture of the church. But guess what? We're not here. We've been snatched away to God and his throne. We are over here with Christ in the constellation of the wedding, which begins with the rapture, the snatching away of the bride. What we are seeing here in the heavens can be interpreted in several different ways. The rapture could occur before this day. If it does, the interpretation would go something like this. Ken Johnson, in his book, Ancient Messianic Festivals and the Prophecies They Reveal, says this about the Feast of Trumpets, also known as Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is also called Yom HaMelech, or the Day of the King. It is the time of Messiah's coronation and the beginning of his kingdom. If a new king was to be crowned that year, the coronation would occur on the festival of Rosh Hashanah. When this happened, Psalm 45 was read. Notice the first phrase of this psalm tells us it was to be sung according to the tune of Shoshamin, which is usually translated as the lilies. The Art Scroll commentary on the Psalms states that the correct rendering is set to the trumpet. A king always has his bride with him at his coronation. So if the rapture occurs before this day, it's telling us that we, the bride, are with Christ the King at his coronation. It could also occur on this day or after, but before the start of the tribulation. Only time will tell, but there's still more. Total eclipses, solar and lunar, can be placed into 3 groups. The first group beginning with the blood moon tetrad, followed in the middle by the Revelation 12 sign, and completed by this solar eclipse in Gemini. This first group is about our wedding with Christ, which begins with the rapture. There are 7 blood moons in this group of eclipses having to do with the rapture. Blood moons represent the atonement of Christ. Those who are covered by the blood of Christ will be with Christ in heaven during the 7-year tribulation. Between the blood moon tetrad and the blood moon triad is the Revelation 12 sign. Revelation chapter 12 is about the rapture, our escape from the dragon. The last solar eclipse appears in the constellation of Gemini. This seems to indicate something will be in the constellation when the rapture occurs. That something is Jupiter, representing the male child. Christ with his church, also known as the bride of Christ. It will remain in the constellation of the wedding for about 1 year, starting in June of this year until June of next year. The next series of eclipses, 7 of them, appear in constellations having to do with the tribulation. The tribulation begins when the Lamb opens the first of 7 seals, releasing the 4 horsemen. The first horse released is a white horse. Sagittarius represents the white horse. The next 5 eclipses alternate back and forth in constellations representing Christ the Judge, Taurus, and Scorpio, the Scorpion, representing Satan's kingdom. While this final blood moon is appearing in Libra, symbolizing judgment, the sun at the same time is in the constellation of Taurus. Taurus represents Christ the Judge. Taurus is an ox, the auroch, the fiercest and most feared ox to ever exist. It was hunted to extinction. Jesus tells us in the book of Revelation, which is written in Greek, that he's the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. The Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, and the Omega the last. In Hebrew, he would be the Aleph and the Tav, which is the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In the most ancient Hebrew alphabet, the first letter, the Aleph, was a picture of an ox. The last letter, the Ta or Tav, looked like a small letter T or a cross. The ancient Jews associated the constellation of Libra with the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Tav or the cross. This last eclipse in the eclipses of the tribulation is telling us who it is who will bring judgment on the earth. The Alpha and the Omega, in Hebrew, the Aleph and the Tav. King Jesus, the one who is called faithful and true, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. The rider of the white horse in Revelation chapter 19, who brings the tribulation to a victorious close. This final series of 7 eclipses all occur in constellations having to do with our escape from the dragon. It is the Lamb of God, Jesus, who's coming for the Christian, whose symbol is the fish. Jesus, the seed of the woman Virgo, is going to crush the head of the serpent. On April 8th, 2024, a comet appeared in the constellation of the Lamb, Aries, during the eclipse. On October 2nd, a comet appeared in the constellation of the Serpent during the eclipse. The armies of heaven fighting the armies of the dragon, the serpent. Revelation 12, 7-9 says this, "Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him." I believe this war has begun. This war is to prevent the rapture from happening. Satan knows that if we are still here, the tribulation cannot begin. Christ's bride, the church, is not destined for God's wrath. This war ends with the rapture. This blood moon occurs over Jerusalem and above the tail of the dragon. At the rapture, the war will come to an end. We will go up to heaven with Christ, and Satan and his angels will be thrown down to the earth. The Jubilee year begins on the 7th day of the 10th month, Yom Kippur. On the calendar used at the time of Christ, the countdown to the Jubilee year begins at sunset on March 30th, 2025, the first day on the Jewish religious calendar. That day is about 2 weeks after this lunar eclipse. The prophet Joel tells us, "The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." Prior to the start of the Jewish religious year, the sun turned to darkness and the moon to blood, fulfilling the prophecy of the prophet Joel. And then, most likely, just weeks before the tribulation begins, we have a blood moon over Jerusalem, the epicenter of the tribulation. And it occurs above the tail of the dragon who will be cast out of heaven along with his angels. God is going to then use the dragon and his armies to punish the inhabitants of the earth during the tribulation. But before the tribulation begins, we escape the jaws of the red dragon and are snatched away to heaven. And that's the story we see here on the Feast of Trumpets. The dragon lies in wait to devour the male child, but the male child has been snatched away to God and his throne. You can make a case for the rapture occurring before, on, or after the Feast of Trumpets. One thing is certain, the signs of the approaching tribulation are everywhere. The peace and security mantra in the Middle East is being repeated over and over again. Our departure is soon. For those of you who want to see where the 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems of the red dragon are found, this next section is for you. It follows the same pattern as the Revelation 12 sign. It uses the stars of the constellations. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads. The head of Cetus consists of 7 stars and 10 horns. Taurus is a horned animal, and its head is made up of 10 stars. And on his head 7 diadems. On the back of Taurus is the Pleiades, also known as the 7 stars. In the Bible, the Pleiades and the 7 stars are one and the same, as you can see in these 2 different translations of the same verse. Seek him that maketh the 7 stars, he who made the Pleiades and Orion. Ken Johnson, in his book Ancient Messianic Festivals, says this, speaking of Leviathan. We see the 7-headed red dragon in the book of Revelation. All the ancient cultures in the Middle East, including Israel, Babylon, and the Arab peoples, had a concept of a 7-headed sea creature they all called Leviathan, which represented an evil empire that would appear at the end of time. From Job 41, the ancient rabbis believed that Leviathan was a terrible beast that was king of the children of pride, and that he would make a covenant with many and break that covenant, not be a servant forever. Everything we see in the heavens right now is telling us that the tribulation is about to begin. And so is everything else that's happening on the earth. All the technology is here for the beast system. Artificial intelligence, vaccines that can alter your DNA or alter your thought processes, taking away your free will. The mark of the beast may be a vaccine that makes you a slave of the beast. Your allegiance is to him and to him alone. Belief in Christ is no longer possible. The Bible tells us that once you take the mark, salvation is no longer a possibility for you. It's been 8 years since the Revelation 12 sign appeared. 8 is the number of new beginnings in the Bible. We are going home, and Christ is going to begin to take his kingdom back from the dragon. Thanks for watching.